I think it's time. Welcome everybody. Thanks for joining the session here today around cognitive service delivery. I'm Peter Adams. I'm Senior Director of Product Management, responsible for our ITSM enterprise solution, what we sell under the Remedy brand now on-premise and as Helix ITSM in the SaaS world. Thanks again for joining today. This morning you heard a lot about our announcement to align our ITSM solutions and our ITOM solution in really one aligned joint circle here that covers different functional areas from discovery to servicing to remediate, etc., etc. And while we put a lot of focus on making sure these interactions work well, you saw some examples this morning around how you can combine solution elements from these different fields. Of course, we want to make sure that we are also highly competitive in each of these areas, right? So on the IT service management side, we've been a leading vendor for a number of years, and of course we want to keep being at the cutting edge when it comes to ITSM capabilities. So I'll drill down today specifically into this service portion of the overall DSOM solution landscape here. And talk a bit more about what are we doing around IT service management specifically, and then secondly, what we're also doing for non-IT services. As you know, we are also investing in service management for HR or facilities, etc. Now, when you look at the trends that are going on in the ITSM world, it's really interesting that it's less about trends in the individual ITSM processes like incident, problem, change, knowledge, etc. Of course, things are evolving in each of these areas, but the more impactful trends, I feel, are really horizontal across all these processes. And so what I want to present today on the IT side is really a story in 4 chapters, so to speak, right? I want to talk about user experience, again, why it's important, what we're doing here to stay competitive and stay in the lead. We heard already this morning why cognitive is so important in this tsunami of technology and data. Then we talk a lot about DevOps and ITSM. That's probably from a process perspective the most impactful area. Again, not just for one specific process, but across the board. And then last but not least, while there's a lot of benefit for our customers in using our solution as a SaaS version or in the SaaS deployment model, we know that many existing customers are still on-premise, and so we continue to invest in making sure customers can operate our solutions efficiently, right? That's a very important aspect. So that covers the IT world, and again, other part is the non-IT world. I have some information at the end, right? So let's dive a little bit into details here. So again, user experience from my perspective, you all know that we have invested quite significantly into updating our user experience over the past probably 5 years, both on both sides of the service desk, so both for the consumer of a service as well as the fulfiller, so to speak, the service desk agents, the change coordinators, etc. And that continues to be a big focus area. And it's really mostly around how do we make sure people adopt the solution, right? Because you don't really get the full benefits of the process that you're introducing unless people actually follow it inside the tool, right? And don't work outside of it. So this user experience is extremely important from an engagement perspective, and then of course also from a productivity perspective. We want to continue to push that users are more effective and more things get automated rather than being done manually. Just wanted to quickly highlight some of the things that we've delivered over the past year or so since I presented here the last time. Of course, again, we continue to build out our smart IT capability. This very innovative ITSM UI, both mobile and web, and we continue to build out these capabilities. Couple of things that are worthwhile to call out, and there's a long list of enhancements at a more detailed level here, but I want to call out a few specific things. So first of all, we introduced a new change calendar in our smart IT user experience. We had a calendar type view when it comes to scheduling of changes and releases, but it was again more in context of that scheduling interaction, right? With this calendar, you can really basically summarize and display in a calendar type view all changes, all releases, and even again, business events and other date-driven information, so to speak. So that was, again, a very important component to add to the smart IT experience. Overall, again, we want to make sure that we build out the capabilities there, continue to improve the interactions, and then also, of course, make sure that companies can adopt it if they have customized it, right? The second key highlight I want to talk about in Smart IT is the live chat workspace that we introduced in version 1908. Now, you hear us talk a lot, and you saw this morning in a demo about the chatbot agent, and it's an extremely important component for us because it really supports the shift left trend from a service perspective, right? And you'll hear more about it actually in the session afterwards, right? As part of our general self-service interaction investment, so to speak. A lot of focus is on the chatbot because that's really done fully automated in a conversational style, right? Now, when you introduce the chatbot, it's important that you probably cannot do this in one version or in one deployment for all the different types of interaction. In fact, we do recommend that you identify the most important interactions, automate them in a chatbot, and then you incrementally build it out. But that also means, there's always some interactions that are probably not modeled right now in the chatbot. The chatbot is not trained for it, right? And so you always need to have this option to seamlessly switch over to a live chat interaction. So if the user is in a chat-based tool and the chatbot cannot really help, there should be a seamless transition over to a live person. Now, from a UI perspective for the consumer, it's one and the same, right? They continue to stay in that same chat window, but of course then there has to be an agent, a live agent, a person who picks up the chat request and then answers, right? And that's again the model that we introduced here in our Smart IT solution in version 1908. So you can respond to multiple chat requests that come here. You see here on the left-hand side, there are two requests coming in. Users, agents can work in parallel on multiple sessions. There is contextual information, very much following the general principle of Smart IT, that users get proactively contextual information about who the customer is, what are helpful knowledge resources. So you can click on the knowledge tab up here. And then, of course, there's the accelerators that in general we've been supporting on the live chat side for quite a while. So you can run scripts and, have predefined text blocks that kind of automate a lot of the interaction. All of that then can be translated into a incident or work order. And of course, the conversation itself is passed into the corresponding record as a work info node, right? So highly effective interaction. That basically makes use of or augments, the chatbot, the automation capability by the kind of failover option to talk to somebody in person. Again, a very important aspect for the adoption of the chatbot initiatives, right? Then, besides the ITSM UI, we of course have a parallel investment into building a modern UI for the CMDB, and those are really kind of closely tied to each other. Our new CMDB UI basically, again, on the one hand, modernizes the interaction that traditionally had been covered by Atrium Explorer and on the corresponding UI option, but in every cycle where we build this out, we also look at how can we innovate the CMDB interaction. So we study the persona of a CMDB administrator, of a config manager very closely. And then we look at not just how to modernize the UI that we have, but also how to introduce new interactions and innovate, right? And we've done a number of new things here in the CMDB UI over time. If you haven't seen it, definitely recommend that you take a look at it. Now in the latest release, 1908, we addressed one very important big component, and that's the class manager. So here you basically can browse your entire class hierarchy, right, that reflect the inheritance model basically of the data model in the CMDB. You can look at attributes, you can define custom attributes if you want to extend the data model. All of that is possible with a modern experience that pretty much, again, is aligned with Smart IT, and you can easily flip back and forth, right? Those are important aspects. And then last but not least, something that a lot of customers don't know is the capabilities we have from a service support perspective around client management. So especially when it comes to desktop support, dealing with any kind of customer client management issues, right? We have a component called BMC Helix Client Management that helps customers, first of all, understand what users have on a client desktop, and this could be across different device types, even mobile. You can trigger actions, and all of this can be driven out of the centralized service desk UI, so you wouldn't have to switch back and forth between different tools. You can basically, from your service desk interaction, trigger action on a client device. You can reboot it, you can look at the registry settings, you have lots of detail basically that goes beyond what is just in the CMDB. And more recently, we've introduced also this remote control capability as part of client management. So number one is you can basically remotely connect to the customer system, and then you can even record these sessions and basically make sure that you can replay this later on, what has happened, in case you need to look at information again, right? You can deploy patches, you can basically automate a lot of the client interactions. So highly interesting system, and again, fully integrated from a service desk agent experience. That's an important part. You don't have to flip back and forth between different tools. That's an extremely important aspect for the productivity of the users, right? Okay, so that was topic number one. Topic number two is cognitive service management, right? That's probably the biggest impact in general from a productivity perspective, right? Because what you can do with cognitive capabilities is basically automate things that traditionally have been associated with human activity, right? Understanding natural text or kind of classifying some unstructured data. All of these things you can now do in an automated way, and that, again, is a huge boost to productivity. And I mentioned last year when I was here, again, our approach that we've integrated this cognitive machine learning service into the ITSM solution at a platform level, so that you can not just use it for the use cases we build out, but you can even use it for your own custom use cases. So in case you have an idea where you need a generic machine learning service, you can leverage that microservice that we've built from within your ITSM custom workflow, and you can address it there, right? Again, we use that for things like categorization, avoiding that users basically end up with putting other into the category section, right? But over the course of the year, we've built this out quite a bit. And again, we're leading the industry in the use of this machine learning capability, right? So a very good example that shows the value, the ROI that you can get out of this is the way how we automate inbound email assessments. So we've always had an inbound email engine, as most of you probably know. In our ITSM solution, it would basically generate an incident from an email that is sent to the service desk, right? Many service desk organizations still allow that people just send an email to a specific address, and in some customers, including BMC IT, by the way, we are probably at the 30-40% of the volume comes in through email because it's super convenient for all the employees, right? Now again, what typically happens is you create an incident automatically, yes, but then it's a fairly generic vanilla incident, as I call it, right? It's not properly categorized. You don't even know if it's an incident, could actually be a request. So there's a lot of unknown about it, and by and large, what happens is a user from the service desk organization has to look at the incident, assess it, and then take action, either categorize it and assign it to a specific group, or correspondingly cancel it and say, no, this is really a request, it doesn't make sense to handle this as an incident, right? So all of this manual work, human work, so to speak, that somebody has to log in, and even if it takes 5 minutes to assess an incident, it adds up when 40% of your work comes in through email. That all can be automated, right? And the logic that we've implemented here is first, it look at the text of the email and try to assess whether it's an incident or a service request, right? If it's a service request, it will send the information back to the user right away and say, look, this is not an incident, we cannot handle it, it's a request, please go here. And there's a link to the right catalog item included, again, also determined by the machine learning service, that the user can click on and just fill out the request, right? So it'll shorten the cycle, basically, that you cancel a request and have send a manual email back to the user, right? Now, if it's an incident, first we'll check if there's knowledge articles that we can send back to the user by email, again, all automated. So if there is a matching knowledge article, we'll send that back to the user and say, hey, have you tried this, right? Then, if not, if you actually have to create an incident, we'll look at the templates. So you don't create a vanilla incident, you actually create one with the right template, which means you can assign it to the right group, everything. Nobody has to manually triage it, right? And then if there's no template that matches, at least we're trying to auto-categorize it. And that generally works. So at least the assignment problem, again, is handled, right? So if you, again, calculate that, 30–40% of your emails coming in through incident, nobody has to manually triage this anymore. It's a huge cost savings, right? Now, the other thing is, very initially, again, we focused a lot around the service desk aspects of the work because that involves, most users in the system, so to speak. But now we're starting to use this same machine learning service also for other ITSM processes. So, for example, we have a very basic risk calculation here. I'll get to that topic in a second as well. But just based on a machine learning service, you can have a basic risk calculation or recommendation, as we call it, or you have a payroll, a problem root cause evaluation, right? So the idea here is, again, we are not filling this in automatically. Just based on the data, we're trying to make an assessment and give the user a recommendation. We'll still leave it to the change coordinator, the problem coordinator to make the decision, is that recommendation actually valid and should I fill this in, right? Because again, that's usually the data here is much more uncertain than in the categorization area, right? Where you have lots and lots of tickets, right? So again, as you can see, we're expanding beyond the core service desk use cases and move more towards other ITSM processes to leverage this cognitive technology. But as I stated, right, it's important to understand that you can apply this to any use cases where the general pattern of a machine learning service fits, right? You can implement you can leverage that service for any custom workflow that you want, right? It's not restricted to the out-of-the-box scenarios that we've built, right? The other part is, the machine learning or in general cognitive technology can not only fully automate interactions of a human person, right? Which is the case here when you look at this inbound email processing or categorization, right? They often are just supportive, right, for agent activity, right? One of the functionality we have here is this cognitive insights, basically that augments our reporting solution that we have with smart reporting. So what we do here is, the system basically looks at data in the reporting solution, looks at the charts, and then does a verbal interpretation of the most important points about this chart. So it's automated text generation here. It's a little hard to see, and the details are not really relevant here. But if you look at this bullet list here, it's text that is auto-generated by the system. And what it does, it basically explains what are the most important points about this chart so that the user doesn't have to look into it and kind of figure out themselves, or what are the significant data points, right? The system supports the activity by giving suggestions or explanations about this chart, and applies to, again, various areas here. So again, that's a good example what we deliver in terms of augmenting the human activity, not just replacing it, right? Both of that is a value of cognitive technology, and we continue to invest heavily in this area, and continue to be at the cutting edge here. Just the recent Gartner ITSM critical capabilities report has shown that, from a artificial intelligence or AI-ITSM capability, right? BMC and our ITSM solution here is really the top solution from a ranking perspective. Right? So for the third section here on IT service management, I'd like to welcome Lois Mroz. Thanks for joining here. Lois is from E-Trade here. Thanks. And you can take the microphone. We thought we bring a customer on here to talk a little bit about what they're doing around DevOps in general, make this more conversational. So maybe we should start first with an introduction of the E-Trade IT organization and you specifically, right?
Sure. My name is Lois. I'm managing the release side as part of the change management and release team. Basically, we've been using ITSM since the beginning. I've been with E-Trade for about 16 years now and sat in all the different spaces within ITSM. And at least for change management, we are really trying to focus on actually changing how we do change management. Gone are the days where we have really long cabs, and so we're here to focus on basically how can we shift everything left. We've started our DevOps program I would say maturely about 2.5 years ago. We've adopted Agile initially with a few applications and a few application teams, but now we've expanded across the entire organization for all of technology. And so having that ITSM still be a part of our organization, because it won't leave, we will continue to integrate that with our DevOps programs.
So how many changes in general, just to get a sense to the audience how big of an organization it is, how many changes do you make per month or per year?
I would say on average we're about 50 plus changes a night. Okay. And we have very large releases about every 2 to 3 weeks, where all the applications across the infrastructure, across the organization are release some sort of feature, bug, service.
Okay, and then the DevOps trend, do you see that in specific pockets of your organization, or is it something that is really kind of adopted across the entire organization? Can you share a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Actually, it is adopted across the entire organization. When I said we've matured in our DevOps journey, we've always did a little bit of DevOps, but the company reorged into a holistic approach where out of the shared services team, we've developed a DevOps team, even though DevOps is not really a team, right? It's a way of working. We've taken that approach for about 2.5 years now. So.
Okay, and so what do you think drives this trend towards DevOps? What benefit do IT management or generally the company leadership expect from it, right?
Really, it came out of our shifting everything left, right? We've pivoted towards Agile. We went away from waterfall, and this is across all of our application teams as well as our infrastructure. And DevOps really came out of being able to how do we give our developers a better way to integrate everything from development all the way through production. How do we make quality of life better for them? How do we make sure our pipelines are integrated across so that we do have that continuous deployment? Okay.
So from a process perspective, what impact does it have on your ITSM process world, so to speak? There's often this discussion, do you need ITSM if you're doing DevOps? Can you share a little bit in general from a process perspective what the impact is?
So mainly from a process perspective, at least at E-Trade, for all the ITSM spaces, the biggest impact still is within change and incident management. So we still will continue to have change management, but what DevOps will do for us is how quickly can we get application and developers for our features and products that we offer our customers, as well as the features and products that we need ourselves within IT, out to the customers. Yeah. And so DevOps really became a way to how can we tightly integrate it and basically have that.
So you still want the benefits of a change process, a track record, etc. But on the other hand, there's this need for velocity, right? How can
Right.
you get the innovation faster out? So what impact does it have in general on the tool itself, right? Let's say, are there new requirements that came up for ITSM solutions when you're following that process?
So yeah, because we still file changes just for making our pipelines within technology better, right? So you have change management for us within IT as well as rolling out products and features to our customers. And to be able to then build that and integrate it with our incident management, we need to be able to come full circle to say, okay, what are we developing? What is the quality? A lot of the a lot of what is being asked of us now is how do we continue to roll? How do we continue to release with quality as well as the frequency? We have to respond to market and have, especially within the financial services world, E-Trade has definitely taken a different business model within zero commissions now when we had to respond to market. So being able to see how quickly can we turn around development with quality and service it out to our customers with fewer incidents and maintain integrity.
And so that has impact on the tools itself, right?
Yes.
I think one of the requirements you talked about is integrations, right? So can you share a little bit more about what you're looking for in terms of integration?
Sure. So at least for E-Trade right now, again, with our SDLC, everything, we use the Atlassian tool suite, right? So Jira is where we start with our development. But anything that starts with development has to eventually get down through change management and out through release, which is our ITSM tools with BMC. And so we need to be able to have that integration of the tools, starting with development all the way through to our operations and out to the customers.
So, I mean, we've heard that requirement from a number of customers, and again, on our side, we're handling this through our BMC Helix multi-cloud service management solution, right? Which is really not just an integration scenario, it's an end-to-end solution to handle a number of use cases, but the most important one you see at the top here below the circle is this DevOps scenario, right? Where you have integrations between ITSM and then your agile software development tool of choice, whether it's Jira, what you're using, or whether it's Azure DevOps or CA Agile Central. There's a variety of tools that are supported. That's one of the key use cases that we hear as well from customers, right? And when I say end-to-end solution, it really is more than just pushing data from one system to the other. In the end, you need to make the users productive. So when it comes to the change coordinators, for example, they should be able to see the Jira ticket within the ITSM UI. They should be able to collaborate on it. There needs to be a two-way collaboration options. Those are all parts of that solution. So it goes again beyond just pushing the data back and forth, right? That's an important part of it, right? So what other requirements do you see from a tools perspective that's important for these kind of scenarios, right?
Yeah, so definitely you've honed it on in here. We have, using Jira as our SDLC and our development piece, being able to bundle a bunch of those user stories and understand what kind of impact is it actually going to have on our environment when we used our ITSM tool to roll it out to production. Yeah. So when we say differences in process, and that's really where it comes down to, is we have, again, we need to change how we do change management. Gone are the days, our really long cabs. We need to be able to have some sort of analytical way to help us augment instead of manually looking at every single ticket, trying to make sense of what the developers did all the way through production, what kind of incidents it's going to get. So the need for this analytics tool, some sort of smart learning that will be able to provide us the data that we need so that we can focus our change management and our ITSM teams to focus on actual data-driven decisions and being able to understand the value instead of spending our time and our resources within the teams to do that.
And the data typically comes again from multiple sources, and you really try to kind of aggregate it into some single risk score, basically, right?
That's right. So if the ticket integration is there and the consolidation is there, then it really becomes on how can we use this to really help drive decisions. We need to be able to, I just walked out of the CIO's office about a week ago, and he asked us and said, isn't there some sort of change risk score that we can give these application developer teams so that not everybody gets treated equally? If everybody's developing with coding, if we have teams that have coding standards in place and they're following the process all the way through, then we should be able to predict the type of risk and the type of incidents that are going to come out of that. And so being able to roll up the data across multiple systems and make sense of it is really what we're looking for.
Okay, yeah. So in the end, where you can move fast, you want to move fast, but then where you need to take a step on the brake, basically, you have at least the data that supports it, right? Great. Thanks a lot. I appreciate you coming up here and sharing a little bit what you're doing. Thanks. So I do want to close out this topic around DevOps and ITSM on one other process that we hear from some customers, and again, that's more support-centric, right? So what we hear is that when companies, go all into this DevOps scenario, the traditional support process that has this hierarchy of level 1, level 2, level 3 often doesn't gel well with these support teams, right? And in big enterprises, the idea that you just give the product team some pager and they handle it, it does not quite apply. So if you want to do support at scale in a larger enterprise, yet that is aligned more with the DevOps principle, then you have to look at new ways of support processes. And one of the new ways that you can actually read a lot about is swarming, right? Which is a way to organize your service desk work in a more collaborative approach, basically replacing this rigid hierarchy, and it gives much more autonomy to these swarming teams that basically on a regular basis look at what input is coming in from a defect or issue perspective and then kind of work it off. So we won't have a lot of time to dive into details here, but again, on the BMC side, we've been supporting these new ways of working, as we sometimes call it, across different ITSM processes, including support. And we've done a lot of work around swarming, both in terms of bringing this into the ITIL 4 standard. Actually, we have a person that is supporting that, but as well in terms of tools capabilities, right? So we had supported swarming in a basic way within our own ITSM UI since the 1902 release, but more recently we've kind of expanded over into the supporting this in enterprise collaboration tools, and the first version that we support here is Microsoft Teams. So the way how this works here is very similar to a ChatOps scenario, right? In the ChatOps world, you basically drive all your collaboration in a chat tool, whether it's Microsoft Teams or Slack, it doesn't really matter. But then within that collaboration tool, you actually can trigger actions to the outside world. You can reboot your server, those are ops action. What we're doing here is basically transitioning the same idea to the support world, right? So you can basically execute support actions from within the collaboration tool, and you can look at knowledge in from your ITSM system. You can update the status of a ticket. You basically can drive the interaction with the ITSM system from within the collaboration tool without having to switch back and forth between different UIs. So again, sometimes we do refer to it as ChatOps because that's a well-established term and concept, right? But the idea is the same. And again, one of the use cases you can use this for is this swarming approach, where people meet and collaborate. They look at the inflow of data, of incidents that come in, and you collaborate again around these incidents and kind of close them out, work them off, assign them. You can invite other people who are knowledgeable about a certain domain area to the team basically, and work off here. So highly interesting solution, and we plan to expand this to other products here. We know each company has different ITSM solutions, so from that perspective, we do plan to support different models here. Right? Again, what happens here in this DevOps and ITSM space, is to some degree reflected in ITIL 4. We are very much active participants in this attempt to bring in some of the ideas that have emerged in other areas back into the IT service management world, because we fundamentally think there's still a lot of value in looking at technology from a service perspective, having well-defined processes, etc. So from that perspective, we think that's still a valid model, but it needs, in some areas, a bit of refresh to align with the general trend towards DevOps and the new learnings that people have done here in this area. So last topic here is around operations, and that's a very short one. Again, I just wanted to emphasize we continue to invest into making sure that customers can operate our solutions very effectively. That's a very important point for us, even though we believe ultimately the best experience comes from a SaaS solution where BMC takes over the upgrades and the infrastructure management and the monitoring and all these, kind of administrative things, right? And you could focus on the process work and the automation and the innovation, right? Still, we realize that many customers are using it on premise today, and we want to make sure that we continue to push the limit here. One of the items that we are really working towards is a full automation of upgrades, deployments, of customizations, of custom build code, etc., very much in line with the general DevOps philosophy. So, we are building out CI/CD pipelines on our side, and we want to enable our customers to do the same. And we've put a lot of work into making sure our deployment model, for example, can be integrated with automation solutions like Jenkins, right? That's really our kind of vision, that you build these DevOps processes for the Remedy software itself, right? And you can operate it that way. The other part that is important is, of course, integrations. That's part of the cost here. And while there's multiple options around integrations, including our no-code integration service, a common request that we've heard from our customers is the ability to make outbound REST API calls from within the ITSM system. So that is something we added in the latest 1908 release. So from within your Remedy workflow, you can reach out to a third-party REST API, get the responses back and use them within your workflow, right? And you can, basically leverage that as part of your workflow definition in the ITSM system, right? And then last but not least, again, cost savings can also come from just reducing database license costs, and that is one of the reasons why we've invested in supporting our ITSM system with Postgres and Amazon Aurora, right, which is a Postgres variation, basically, right? So again, will help you reduce the license cost for the database side, right? Now, last topic, and we're getting towards the end of the presentation, is I want to share a few more minutes around our business workflow solutions. I spend a lot of time around ITSM, again, very important topic for us. Of course, we want to retain our leadership here. But, as hopefully all of you know, we've basically leveraged our expertise around service management and the maturity we have there and transitioned that over to non-IT shared services. HR was a big focus initially, but more and more we're covering a multitude of processes here, facilities, payroll. Again, you can apply this to multiple different solutions. And again, the solution we're using here is called BMC Helix Business Workflows. And the reason why we introduced a separate product for this, a separate offering for this, is that there are specific requirements in this area that are different from an ITSM solution, right? And I've tried to summarize it here on the slide here. First of all, again, when it comes to HR data, for example, there are much higher requirements around data privacy, the ability to encrypt certain fields or to protect them from other users, right? In some cases, there's even a need to completely separate the data from the IT world, right? So that's one. Different terminology. Again, if you have an HR worker working in an HR case, they often can't really understand the ITSM terminology, the ITIL terminology. So that's one reason. The other part is, as you roll this out, typically across multiple processes, you need to have something that allows the lines of businesses to easily configure their own processes. So it's much more a model where you have a business analyst and they need to be able in a no-code visual process configuration tool to kind of update this, right? That becomes a much more important requirement in the non-IT world than it is in the IT world. And then the last one is around cloud integrations, a very important aspect as well. Most of the HR solutions these days, for example, are sitting in the cloud, right? If you look at Workday, again, a lot of the recruitment tools, these are all SaaS-based solutions, right? So it's really important to have an excellent integration capability for these SaaS solutions, right? So again, I'm going to touch on a few of those capabilities that we specifically built to address these line of business requirements that are a bit different from the standard world, right? As I stated, a lot of emphasis on graphical configuration tools to define processes, whether it's the life cycle of a ticket. Again, maybe one organization wants to handle differently. Maybe facility says, I want to have a different status life cycle than the HR organization, right? So you can visually edit the status life cycle of cases. And again, each organization basically can control their own destiny here, right? Same for fulfillment processes. So, when it comes to HR, there's also a lot of automation happening. What happens if somebody asks for a form letter about employee verification, employment verification, right? That process should be largely automated, right? And again, our HR solution is able to define these automation processes fully graphically, and each business analyst can basically control that without needing IT to code anything, right? That's a very important aspect, right? Last but not least, and another example is that in the HR world, for example, there's a much higher need for handling documents, right? There's form letters, there's policy documents, etc. Much higher requirement versus on the IT world, and again, that drives basically the need to have a dedicated solution that really is evolved based on the requirements in that specific domain area. And again, that's where we iterate and innovate very fast in the non-IT domain area. So again, extremely important aspect of our portfolio, that you can cover both the IT world as well as the non-IT world, right? So I want to close out again summarizing, we are in this transition over from a very manual, reactive world towards a highly automated world, not just from a self-service perspective, but even the workers, the fulfillers, whatever you want to call these roles, right? The service desk agents, etc. More and more is automated and cognitive supported, extremely important. And that's really our vision, to move towards this highly automated, highly intelligent system here. And we're very proud that just recently Gartner again ranked our ITSM solution as #1 when it comes to the both standard INO use cases as well as digital workplace use cases, right? It shows that we continue to invest in this, that we continue to hit the mark on these trends in the ITSM market, and we're very proud that again we've achieved this leadership across a large number of areas again this year, and we expect to continue to lead this, right? With that, thanks very much for your interest, appreciate, and want to pass this on then to the next presenter. Thank you very much.